Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Friday everybody. Let's start with the Chinese economy and continue from yesterday's theme of consumption and debt. In yesterday's video, we discussed efforts from Beijing and banks to disincentivize households from paying back their mortgages early. In addition to concerns for bank profits and financial instability, a desire for households to consume rather than pay down debt was a driving factor behind the policy push. Consumption, as we have explored in previous videos, will likely shoot up this year from pent-up spending. However, the question remains how big this boost is going to be and how long it will be sustained for before weakening back down again. Beijing wants as much consumption as possible to counter the reductions in exports and property investment. China's economy will likely suffer this year. The healthiest way to achieve this is through households earning more through productivity increases or by earning a larger share of overall economic output, i.e. a higher share of disposable income to per capita GDP. However, there is another, less healthy way to achieve higher consumption in the short to medium term: more household debt. This week, Bloomberg's Hong Kong team reports that, quote, Chinese banks are touting a wide variety of retail lending products as authorities need a pickup in consumer spending, end quote, pointing out that while banks typically front-load their credit issuance earlier in the year, the latest lending push comes after General Secretary Xi Jinping last week called for expanding consumer demand in order to realize a virtuous economic cycle. The outlet writes that China Merchants Bank Co., quote, known as the nation's king of retail banking, end quote, gave out 34% rate discount vouchers on a consumer loan in a campaign that ended at the end of January, adding that a 30% rate discount will be extended in February. However, despite all this, consumer confidence is weak. Pre-pandemic consumer retail loans made up about half of all new loans. In 2022, they only comprised about a fifth of new loans. And of course, analysts warn that a major concern too is that many households are already quite over-leveraged. Indeed, in terms of debt to disposable income, Chinese households have already surged past their US peers. Next up for the economy, UK-based Financial Times writes yesterday that global investors have, quote, snapped up a record $21 billion worth of Chinese equities this year as robust economic data spurs traders to make larger bets that the reopening rally has further to run, end quote. As we can see here, international investors using Hong Kong's Stock Connect program to buy Shanghai and Shenzhen listed shares have poured in. In terms of value, shares purchased have jumped to 141 billion RMB, $21 billion this year to date, doubling the previous 2021 record. Positive economic indicators from the last several weeks as China puts zero COVID behind it has excited investors. Indeed, some investors even sound euphoric, betting big that after 3 frustrating years, 2023 will be good for returns. Quote, it's spectacular compared to any other year since the launch of the Connect. Some foreign investors took a little bit more time to get clarification on the strength of the economic recovery and the policy support we were going to get this year. The money has really come back in now that the market has got reassurance that 2023 will be all about growth. End quote. End quote. The first batch of allocation to Chinese stocks by global asset managers is almost done, but asset managers will think about their allocation again in March when China announces its gross domestic product and fiscal spending targets. Those numbers should begin another upcycle for China's equity market. End quote. Next up, China's COVID wave, and then US-China relations. Hey guys, as always, if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to hit that like button. It's a massive help. And anyone who can go that extra mile and help me keep China Update sustainable. This channel relies primarily on your guys' support to keep going. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, though official case numbers are not very reliable, anecdotal reports, economic indicators, and on-the-ground observations all indicate that most of China has well and truly moved past the worst of its massive first COVID wave. We will likely never know the full extent of the pain and suffering inflicted on the people across the country during the initial surge after Beijing abandoned zero COVID late last year, a surge that reached 1 billion infections within the first 40 days or so. But many are nevertheless very happy now to celebrate that the worst is over. Quote, "It's finally over. The chaos in the aftermath of the COVID-19 outbreak is finally over." End quote. Beijing policymakers appear confident too that the country likely will not see a second large wave for at least the next few months. At a press conference in Beijing yesterday, Thursday, the chief epidemiologist of the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention expressed that, quote, "The possibility of a new wave of the COVID-19 epidemic is low in China in the coming months, as the immune protection of the country's population remains relatively high after a nationwide virus outbreak." End quote. Of course, we will continue to follow the situation closely to see what happens, but we certainly hope he is right. Okay, next up, and finally for today's episode, the political and diplomatic fallout from the Chinese balloon incident continues. On Thursday, yesterday, the US State Department released information on the balloon which the US shot down off the coast of South Carolina on Saturday. A senior State Department official said that the balloon had multiple antennas for intelligence gathering and was part of a broader surveillance fleet, adding that China had used similar surveillance balloons over more than 40 countries and that Washington would brief its allies on the program. These disclosures indicate an eagerness by the Biden administration to elevate China's balloon espionage despite the risks to the already poor US-China relationship. US defense officials have confirmed this week that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin tried to reach his Chinese counterpart over the weekend after the US shot down the balloon, but could not get hold of him, in a sign of just how bad lines of communication between Beijing and Washington, even at the top military level, have become. Washington will likely use this episode to strengthen its China stance with important allies. Indeed, US Secretary of State Blinken has already released a joint statement with NATO's Secretary General on the alleged espionage program. Washington is now discussing how to respond. Quote, "It sounds like there will be sanctions and perhaps entry listings for any PRC firms found to have been involved in the development, manufacture, operation of this balloon." And at least one report quotes an FBI official suggesting the possibility of criminal charges. End quote. At the very least, we should expect sanctions for any firms involved with the balloon program. Continuing with Bishop's quote, "Meanwhile, the PRC Ministry of Defense spokesperson appears to have threatened that the PRC may shoot down any US airship that strays into its airspace. I know they can't not respond, but if the PRC wants this to blow over, they really should just stop talking." End quote. The statement he is referring to was made yesterday and is as follows. Quote, "The United States persisted in using force to attack China's civilian unmanned airship, a move that seriously violated international practices and set a very bad precedent. China reserves the right to take necessary measures to deal with similar situations." End quote. Indeed, US media is reporting that in a classified congressional briefing, White House officials had expressed concern about shooting down the balloon earlier because, quote, "it could provoke an escalation of military tensions with China or even a military conflict." End quote. In the same congressional briefing, it was leaked to US media that the alleged Chinese spy balloon had Western-made components with English language writing on them, though some commentators, not having access to currently classified material, have asked whether these words were in fact English or simply the pinyin used to render Chinese words into Latin letters. We will likely know more about this in the coming days. But if US or allied company technology is discovered in the balloon, we should expect more strong calls for even tighter technology restrictions against the PRC, and such restrictions could well pass. This incident has united the US Congress in a way that not much else has in recent years. The House has passed a measure criticizing Beijing for, quote, "its incursion," end quote. The measure was passed with a House vote, 419 to 0. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a great Friday, everybody. Have a lovely weekend, and I will see you all tomorrow.